Good morning, everyone. I am opening up the webinar for folks to kind of trickle in. So we'll go ahead and get started in 1 to 2 minutes. So if you need to clear your throat, get a notepad, get a little bit cozy, we'll go ahead and get started in 1 to 2 minutes while we let some folks in. Okay, it is 9 a.m. I'm going to go ahead and let some of the folks trickle in as we go ahead and start with our introductions. So if you are clicked into our Zoom webinar today, you are here for the Pathways in Technology, Early College High School, or PTech webinar through the Learning Acceleration Support Opportunities Grant. You will commonly hear me referring to Pathways in Technology Early College High School as our PTech or PTech Academies throughout the webinar. So just wanted to make sure to clear that off the top. Seeing a couple more folks trickling in, but I will go ahead and move forward with some more of our introductions. So want to make sure to welcome you all and thank you for joining, especially having renewed interest in our PTech academies and having an interest in implementing one of these academies in your district at one of your campuses. So we're very happy to have you all. My name is Crystal Garza. I'm the Director of Post-Secondary Preparation Programs. On the line today with me, I have Mary Housley, who is our statewide coordinator of College and Career Readiness School Models. We both work with our early college high school models, as well as our Pathways in Technology early college high school models. If any of the folks on the call have already been messaging our box, Mary is the person that has been responding to some of the inquiries. So we will continue to do so, which is why we have our CCRSM mailbox listed as our email to make sure that we get to your inquiries as soon as we can through that mailbox to consolidate. So again, welcome. If you are kind of just joining in, this is the Pathways in Technology Early College High School webinar for the Planning Grants in Learning Acceleration Support Opportunities, or LASO. I'm going to go over some of the agenda and FYI pieces for today's webinar. Excuse me. So we welcomed and introduced ourselves a little bit. We also have on the call some of the folks from our LASO team that have done a really tremendous job of putting a lot of resources together for this competitive grant on the website. So along with CCRSM and LASO, we welcome you to our webinar today. We want to give you all an overview of the application process and timelining for this. Is going to be really critical, about 45 days to complete the application. And we know it's been open since last week. We're also going to give you a deep dive into the PTech program description, give you some context for eligibility, some of the key commitments for this. It's definitely a big undertaking to start one of these PTech academies, what all it takes to score on our planning applications that we have, some of the interview criteria that is there, and some of the allowable expenditures that we have for this particular grant, for this general revenue and state funded grant. And then some next steps and Q&A for you all. We're hoping to give you some time there. I do want to mention the Q&A function on here. We are making sure that those get put on the general FAQ that will be going out for PTech planning. So please make sure to put those questions in there. Mary will be fielding some of those answers in there in real time as best we can. And so another FYI is this session will be recorded and posted on the LASO website. So if at the end of our cycle, we will be taking these recordings and putting them on the website. Just give us a little bit of grace and time to put those up there for y'all, so you can forward them to all of the appropriate folks that you need. So we want to start off first with an overview of LASO and all of the grant opportunities that it entails. So if we are here, we're here to talk about PTech, but it is a part of the Learning Acceleration Support Opportunities, or LASO grant. So based off of some of the really great feedback that we got from the T-Class initiative previously, the Texas Education Agency is attempting to offer streamlined, consolidated grant processes and applications. And in this iteration, we are calling it LASO. So through LASO this year, we are offering approximately $110 million in services and supports. And so how we're doing that is through 8 TEA initiatives that do support learning and acceleration and also innovation for these through the $110 million. We are doing this through one district or LEA program application to access this funding. So this is a single program application for all of these competitive grant opportunities. We wanted to share a little bit of data and why we're focusing so much on the accelerated learning component. So while we have seen a rebound in STAR RLA results, we want to continue that attention and giving it to reading and math to accelerate that learning. And so we've really honed in on what initiatives we would like to offer this cycle that really focus in on learning acceleration and academic gains to continue to provide LEA's support around funding through this. So like we mentioned, LASO will be offering 8 initiatives, of which PTech planning is one of them. So we have a couple of different accelerated learning strategies here at the agency, and the LASO cycle will be anchored in about 3 of them. And those 3 are instructional materials, which is rigorous, high quality instructional materials designed to make up round and master grade level TEKS. More time, which is more time for the students most in need, including expanding instructional time in the summer and with targeted tutoring. And innovative school models, which are the innovative school models used to incorporate all aspects of the learning acceleration framework. And so our Pathways in Technology Early College High Schools, or PTech academies, definitely live within this category. And when we say all aspects, it is definitely all aspects of a lot of different learning acceleration components. And so we'll be going through a PTech deep dive so that people can be more familiar with what it is to actually implement a PTech. But before we go ahead and do that, we are going to talk a little bit and mention the 8 grant opportunities that are spread out over the $110 million that we're providing through LASO competitively. So like I mentioned, 8 grant opportunities, 4 of which are instructional materials, strong foundations implementation supports, strong foundations planning supports, technology lending grant, blended learning grant. In the more time category, we have ADSI planning and execution program summer. Innovative school models, we have our PTech planning and implementation grant, our early college high school planning and implementation grant, and school action fund. Want to mention off the top again that we did provide our CCRSM mailbox email. So if you are a district that's hoping to apply for both PTech and early college high school, you are going to be reaching out to the same box. Wanted to make sure to outline some of the timeline and application pieces for this. We have our general webinars available and up on the LASO website. That was done a handful of weeks ago. The application window has been currently open for about a week and will be open through December 22nd. So you're going to want to make sure to mark that date on your calendar to make sure you have all of the components you need for all 8 initiatives. We are currently doing our program webinar right now, but we will also have another live PTech webinar at the end of this week. And so we will do our best to try and get those recordings out to you all, but if you can catch another live, those are registration links on the website. Please make sure to send as many questions as you can for our FAQs, that deadline being December 1st. We want to make sure to get them up and on the website for folks, because this is a competitive grant process and we want to make sure to get questions answered. For our scoring and vetting, once those applications are submitted on December 22nd, we will go through a scoring, vetting, and interview window January 1st through the 30th, with anticipated award announcements going from February 7th through the 14th. So expect some sort of notice within that window, and just be kind of aware of it. Those do typically go to our district or business offices. Excuse me. For eGrants ADC application, February 7th through the 28th. So be on the lookout for those, because this will be housed in the eGrants space. And then make sure that you are also aware of the negotiation component of this and the no-go window, which is from February 13th through April 13th. We do have another slide. Those are a lot of dates. Just as a reminder, we are recording. There will be a PDF version, but we'll also be going over these timelines and application dates at the end of this webinar. Okay. So again, just to reiterate, because we want to make sure that districts don't miss out on this particular opportunity. We do know that this window does run up against Thanksgiving break and winter break. So we want to make sure that we provide you all with as much runway as possible to complete the application. A unique link was emailed to LEA district superintendents on November 7th. If an LEA is unable to receive the application link, an LEA can refer to a form that's posted on the LASO website to acquire a new link. Want to reiterate that communication with your folks at the district office is really key. LASO is really wonderful being responsive, but just definitely make sure that the folks at the district office receive that unique link to make sure that we're filling out the appropriate applications. And on that note, we know that folks are really itching to see the application holistically. So there is a PDF application for your convenience posted on the LASO website. A best practice that I always tell folks is convert that PDF to a Word document, and now you can start typing into it and have all of your information in one space. So while the PDF application is up on the LASO website for your convenience, we will only accept formal submissions of the application through Qualtrics and that unique link. So you're going to want to connect with folks as much as possible, knowing that it's already been a week that the application has been live. We want to communicate some pieces around change requests and declines. This LASO grant is of a competitive nature. So we want to kind of distinguish the differences of T-class and LASO. T-class was a very unique circumstance with emergency relief funds. Change requests and decline options were provided to LEAs. With LASO, we are no longer operating under the same circumstance. So LASO will be anchored in informal, discretionary, competitive grant processing, where change and declines are not advisable. If declines are requested, they will be considered on a case-by-case basis for the district, and this could raise the LEA's federal grant risk level in the coming year. Excuse me. So this is why questions in the Q&A, FAQs, these webinars, reviewing any related documents is so critical. We want to make sure to provide grants to folks that are definitely ready to implement a lot of these components that we're going to be talking about today. So definitely, as you all are having conversations with your districts and campuses about the viability of any of these initiatives, make sure to kind of keep these components in mind. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and go into a PTech deep dive. I want to remind folks that we will be able to answer questions as they come into the Q&A. Mary will be handling those. So please don't hesitate to continue on as we're going through some of the components for the Pathways in Technology Early College High School Planning and Implementation Grant. So at a high level, like we mentioned, the PTech initiative falls under an innovative school model incorporating all aspects of learning acceleration. For this particular grant, we have allotted 1 million, which means that the estimated range of award is up to 100,000 with an estimated award of 10 districts. An estimated timeline would be a planning year in 23-24. What this means is that you would not be serving PTech students until 24-25. A big part of planning year is making sure that you have all of your partners in a row. So you have your higher ed partner and your business partner lined up, and they're ready to serve students along with you in 24-25. So this is kind of a non-negotiable point. We want to make sure that campuses are as prepared as possible before they even start offering students all of the different components that they would like to through a PTech Academy. So I want to get into a little bit, what is an actual pathway in technology early college high school, and why are we doing some of this work? And so this particular grant offers campuses an opportunity to build a PTech Academy within their district. And so a PTech Academy offers opportunities for students to earn a high school diploma while simultaneously earning an industry certifications and or an associate degree on or before the 6th anniversary of a student's first day of high school at no cost to the student. So lots to unpack there. At a really high level, we're wanting to make sure that students are earning the opportunity for their high school diploma, as well as campuses providing different opportunities for things like industry-based certifications or level 1, level 2 certificates, or an associate degree to students at no cost. And a big part of the reason it's no cost is because intentionally we would like for campuses and districts to recruit students that are historically underserved. If you'll notice on there, the statute does mention on or before a 6th anniversary of a student's first day of high school. So what this means is that a PTech Academy can continue to serve students optionally in a 5th or 6th year. This is not a requirement. This is often, again, why we have a PTech planning year, is because campuses need to decide early on whether they would like to continue supporting a student in an optional 5th or 6th year. Just giving you a landscape of some of our PTech campuses currently, the majority of campuses do operate in a 4-year model, which means that they graduate their students with outcomes with a high school diploma and other post-secondary opportunities by their traditional graduation date in 4 years. So we often get a lot of questions of if a 5th year or 6th year is mandatory. It is not. It is an option that is set through legislation. So you do not need to support them in the 5th or 6th year unless you are a campus or district that is opting into that option. So who is all involved in this PTech grant outside of the campus or the district? We do require that a campus maintains a partnership with an institution of higher education to provide the dual credit opportunities to the PTech Academy, and with a business and industry partner to provide work-based support. So it does take 2 different partners to do some of this work. And we wanted to make sure to provide some of the codifying legislation there, where a lot of the tenets of PTech are actually pulled from as well. So again, what is the purpose of the grant specifically for the PTech planning and implementation? So we are wanting to help eligible applicants who receive the grant engage in months of PTech model planning and implementation with the support from our TEA selected technical assistance provider to establish foundational components of the PTech program. So we do have a document called the PTech Blueprint that is available on the website. If you looked at our program guidelines, there is a link to the PTech Blueprint so that folks can be more familiar with it. It's about a 20-25 page document. like I've mentioned at the top of this, it's almost like you're building a small learning community for these particular models. It is not a small feat. So grantees that receive this particular grant for planning and implementation will spend the first months in planning to implement the design elements and requirements as aligned by the blueprint, and will be provided services by our TEA selected technical assistance provider at no cost to the grantees. So just want to also reiterate that if you are a P-TECH grantee, you do not need to set aside any of the $100,000 to pay our TEA selected technical assistance provider. So if you are hoping to get additional contracted or consulting services that are not from Educate Texas, you are allowed to use that with your early college, with your P-TECH funds, excuse me. Just wanted to make sure to note that. So what do the programs look like in terms of being at the physical campus? If you are a P-TECH grantee or just operating a P-TECH program, you may establish a whole campus model, a standalone campus model, a school within a school or a small learning community, or any other model chosen by the campus and approved by TEA. That's absolutely allowed. So thinking about as you're applying for this grant, what kind of student cohort are you looking at? Especially knowing that this is very CTE driven, what cohorts of that are you going to be offering within your P-TECH program? So planning grant funds may be used to support campus needs for establishing any of the foundational elements of P-TECH. And so I've got some really great examples of allowable expenses a little bit later as we go through this particular webinar. So at a high level, wanted to point out some of the key pieces to P-TECH programming. So community college partnership, the LEA should be partnering with an identified community college to implement this P-TECH model. Like we've mentioned, having different opportunities like industry-based certifications, level 1 or level 2 certificates, and associate degrees. You can't do that without a really great partner in mind. So we want to make sure that you have those components in place. The P-TECH blueprint is a really big component of implementation. It is mapped back to legislation, as well as some other key components to actually starting one of these schools. So we have an intention for you to implement the design elements, the 6 benchmarks, and meet the state standards for student success within our data indicator system. Recruitment planning is really critical because we want to make sure that these programs are open to students that are a reflection of your district. CTE programs of study are also really critical because our P-TECH programs have to be mapped to CTE programs of study that enable students to combine high school courses and post-secondary courses, post-secondary training, and making sure that you have some sort of MOU agreement with an institution of higher education, and industry experience, making sure that you have some sort of agreement with a regional industry or business partner that will agree to provide work-based education at every grade level. So lots to unpack there. And in some of our key commitments, assurances, and performance and evaluation measures, we'll hear a lot of the same iteration because there are lots of foundational pieces in P-TECH baked into what we just mentioned. But for this particular grant, we want to talk about the eligibility requirements for your district. So for an eligible LEA, you should be serving students in grade 9 through 12 currently, so already offering a traditional high school, or will begin serving students in grade 9 or students in grades 9 and 10 in the first year of implementation in 24-25, and will progressively scale up by adding at least 1 grade level per year after the first year of implementation. So a very common question that I get asked is, we are a school district that might be only offering elementary and middle school, but we will be offering a high school offering very soon. You are eligible to apply if you will be serving at least students in grades 9 or grades 9 and 10 or higher in 24-25. So as you're thinking through, if you would like to apply and determining your eligibility for your district, just know that that is an option, but you do want to make sure that if you're applying, you are going to be serving a high school population by that time. Excuse me, ineligible LEAs are recipients of the 1819 PTEC and ICIA Planning Grant, the 1920 PTEC and ICIA Planning Grant, the 1820 PTEC and ICIA Success Grant, the 1921 PTEC and ICIA Success Grant, the 20 to 22 PTEC and ICIA PTEC and Planning and Implementation Grant, the 21-23 PTEC Planning and Implementation Grant, the 21-23 CCRSM PTEC Planning and Implementation Grant, the T-Class 1.0 Decision 9A PTEC Planning and Implementation, or 9B PTEC Success, or the 2020-2022 PTEC Success Grant are not eligible for this grant. So a lot of folks that we've historically been able to provide a really tremendous amount of PTEC funding for are not eligible for this grant. We want to make sure to provide new planning opportunities for grantees in this way. I feel it coming possibly, and I might wait for an FAQ, but if the campus in particular received that grant, they are ineligible for this grant. If you're a district that received this grant previously, but are trying to get a different campus that has never received any of the grant funds in this list, you are eligible to apply. But feel free to also put that in the Q&A, because it is definitely a commonly asked question that we get, given the large amount of grants that we've given in the past for PTEC. So feel free to post that, because that was definitely a mouthful of folks that we previously awarded. So we're going to hop into some key commitments. We do have two different kinds of requirements for PTEC. The first is statutory, and a big part of that is because PTEC is supported by legislation. And then we also have requirements that are TEA requirements, because we saw the need for some things that weren't in legislation, but that were critical to building some of these particular campuses. So the first, like I mentioned a couple of slides ago, was establishing recruitment and enrollment processes that will not exclude or discourage the enrollment of any subpopulation of at-risk students, including but not limited to students who are of limited English proficiency, who have failed a state administered assessment. And then PTEC campuses must provide for a TEA CTE program of study that enables participation in a combination of high school courses and post-secondary courses. Another statutory requirement is that our campuses must enter into some sort of agreement with an institution of higher education that is accredited by a national or regional accrediting body by the Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board. This agreement must provide participating student access to a couple of different post-secondary educational opportunities through the following ways: curriculum alignment, instructional materials, instructional calendaring, programs, courses of study, student enrollment and attendance, grading periods and policies, administration of statewide assessments. So just want to pause for a moment and mention that through House Bill 1625, a lot of memorandums of understandings with community colleges and universities already have components like this built in, even if it is a dual credit MOU. So for any of the folks worrying about where to start, if they do get the grant, or if you're just thinking about being a PTEC campus or providing more dual credit outside of being a PTEC campus, a lot of MOUs are structured this way. So I kind of want to make sure to reassure folks that this long list of requirements is truly statutory, but it's also listed in a lot of places where a lot of folks that do this work already are already very aware of the requirements needed for a memorandum of understanding or an MOU. Another statutory requirement is that a campus must enter into some sort of agreement with a regional industry or business partner in Texas that must meet the following guidelines. Provide 100% of participating students access to appropriate work-based education at every grade level, address regional workforce needs. The industry partner will give a student who receives work-based training or education from the partner with a PTech first priority interviewing for any jobs for a student which is qualified that are available on successful student completion of the program, and reviewing this agreement at least every 2 years and update as necessary. So at a really high level, just some things that I know some folks have asked in the past is, can we have multiple industry or business partners that satisfy one need or two needs, but they can't address all of them? That's absolutely allowed. You can have multiple partners. These requirements are definitely things that you build out over time. So just another reminder that we are providing technical assistance through coaching to any of our PTech grantees to kind of walk through some of these requirements. Some TEA requirements, like I mentioned, the first being establishing a leadership design team to complete the PTech implementation planning year, as well as implementation. So this is incredibly critical. There are a lot of components. It's not just the program guidelines or this webinar, but there is a whole document for PTech blueprinting of what are the key components to implement an actual PTech campus. And so it really and truly takes an entire leadership design team village to put this campus in place and begin serving students in 24-25. So some of the folks that are included in that leadership design team are definitely district office folks that are appropriate, potential assistant principal or principal of that particular campus, counselors, lead teachers. There's definitely a myriad of people and a list on our PTech blueprint for suggested folks to be on that leadership team. The last TEA requirement is pretty straightforward, and that's developing wraparound strategies and services involving multiple stakeholders. So we want to make sure that the services that you already likely providing are attuned to the PTech Academy, knowing that they're receiving more work-based education, they're receiving more post-secondary opportunities. So a great example of heightening wraparound strategies and services is advising. You're definitely going to want to think about what additional supports might these PTech students need in order to be successful in our program. So some of the assurances, we've talked a little bit about the statutory requirements needed, but some of the assurances you're going to notice are very similar, but with some additional differences. And so the first one is provide participating students with flexibility in class scheduling and academic mentoring. The second being open enrollment. We want to make sure that enrollment decisions are not based off of state assessment scores, discipline history, teachers' recommendations, minimum grade point average. We want to make sure that this is an open access type of a program where it's appropriate to have a lottery. The third being PTech campuses allowing participating students to complete high school and on or before the 6th anniversary of the student's first day of high school. So those examples include opportunities such as high school diploma and an associate degree, or a post-secondary certificate, or an industry-based certification, or apprenticeship or other job training programs. So again, we're really trying to intentionally get folks to think about, what can I offer my students in the way of post-secondary outcomes or work-based education training. The fourth being PTech campuses providing all of these services at no cost to participating students, and developing a lot of these opportunities provided to them at no cost. Excuse me. The next assurance is making sure that a student is entitled to the benefits of foundation school program in proportion to the amount of time spent by the student in high school courses. The next one is implementing the design elements, which include 6 benchmarks of the PTech blueprint, and fulfilling the standards for student success measured by our outcomes-based measures. data indicators. And so I do want to take the time to mention the alignment also to our accountability CCMR indicators as well, and noting a lot of similarities in some of the milestones and outcomes that we're trying to plan for PTech. So some of the performance and evaluation measures, wanted to kind of be transparent off the top and say a lot of them are very similar to the assurances, but some of these are a little bit more actionable in terms of we're asking you to perform some of these tasks and evaluate where it's appropriate for you to determine the health of your PTech planning and then PTech implementation with students. So you are agreeing to collecting data and reporting on some of these measures on the following measures. The first being projected student enrollment. So we do have particular student indicators around in PEIMS that collect things for at-risk, English language learners, economically disadvantaged students, and students who receive special education services, and other similar functions like race and ethnicity. So we do ask that. We know that there's an official PEIMS collection, but we always say it's a best practice to be collecting and always thoughtfully thinking about who your targeted population is for these particular programs. Leadership design, team members, meetings, dates, and agendas, having that be available publicly for your community to see how the progression of your PTech Academy is going. Enrollment guidelines, like we said, being very transparent about the students and the enrollment opportunities and tactics. Recruitment plan intentionally for your community. Methods of obtaining input about the implementation of these particular programs. A lot of districts do a really wonderful job of doing focus groups and surveys to kind of determine like the health of your particular academies. So if I hadn't mentioned it before, we do have a large network of campuses. And so we do have a lot of folks that learn from each other and kind of gauging the community sense for some of this methodology. And we also have really wonderful coaches to give you all those suggestions. One of our next pieces is a current signed and dated list of high demand occupations aligned to the courses you're going to be providing. So not a huge leap from some of the CTE components that you need to do for implementing a program of study. They're very similar to what you need for PTech. Some more performative data collecting and reporting. We want to make sure that that signed and dated MOU is reviewed on an appropriate cadence, as well as fulfilling that statutory requirement that we already mentioned, but also making sure that you have, and are aware of the roles and responsibilities of the folks that you're engaging at a business partner level, because we want to be really intentional with their time. Making sure that you have a signed and dated MOU for your institution of higher education that's going to be providing the majority of these grant requirements, as well as providing wraparound strategies and services to your students, and how are you going to scaffold that throughout the time of being a PTech Academy. So definitely a lot of different components. I encourage you all, once this recording is up, to reference this, reference our program guidelines, and of course, reference our PTech blueprint, because again, that is the biggest guiding document for how to implement a PTech campus itself. So I'm going to go over the scoring after you've been able to have the conversations with your districts and campus leaders to see if this is a viable PTech Academy. You're going to want to send in that application. So how are we going to score? All eligible LEA grant applications will be evaluated based on the following criteria. So these criteria, as well as the narrative question scoring: enrollment size, rural classification, and participation in the CCRSM network. If we do receive funding requests that exceed the amount available, we will use oral interviews. If the interviews are used, applicants that receive 70% of the total points available through the sum of the standard and specific criteria that we will go over in the next couple of slides, we will be inviting you to attend an oral interview, which will be conducted virtually. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide to talk a little bit about the scoring and prioritization, and then we will talk about the oral interview process. So we do have 3 questions for PTEC. The first is around program of study. It is a maximum of 8 points earned out of 24 for this particular question. So we want to know if you could describe for us the course of study crosswalking that the school is planning to offer, or how it expands upon current offerings to enhance and build an academic pathway. If you could describe how the course of study will enable a student to combine high school courses and post-secondary courses and identify all of the different post-secondary credentials that you will plan to have students earn, and describe how the post-secondary credentials earned meet local economic needs. So we essentially want to know, if you are already offering some of these courses of study, how do you plan on building or enhancing that academic pathway? Maybe you didn't already offer the whole suite of dual credit that you need for a level 1 certificate, so you want to expand on that. Or maybe you've offered program of study courses but might not have aligned them necessarily to industry-based certifications. We want to know what in particular you're trying to do for this PTEC Academy to enhance or provide those supports to those students to meet the local economic need. So this question is worth 8 points. Our next question is around strategic partnerships with an institution of higher education. Like I mentioned previously, you are required to partner with an institution of higher education. The majority of the dual credit that gets offered is done mostly through a community college or a university. So we want to make sure to have you all describe how your campus intends to work with and secure the partnership of this institution of higher education and align those needs to the MOU that addresses the topics that we mentioned previously. It's not just a matter of wanting to know how you're going to work with them, but some of it is also a matter of making sure that your higher ed partner is aware that you're not just taking you're taking your dual credit and taking it to another level that you might not have thought of before. And so they are definitely one of your partners in expanding some of the services. If you already are offering some, or if you aren't, building out those pathways completely from scratch is definitely an undertaking that takes a handful of months to years. Our final narrative question is around strategic partnerships with business and industry. So a PTEC school must enter into some sort of agreement with a regional industry or business partner in Texas that meets the guidelines that we had previously mentioned. We do want to know how you're going to, we want you to name the regional industry or business partner and describe how the program and the partnership will meet the requirements for working with an industry or business partner. So we want to make sure, again, a big part of it is the awareness, the initial pieces of it. Some folks already have a lot of these components in play. But some other folks are just kind of starting from scratch. So either route that you're on, we want a good level of detail to make sure that we have enough to score your narrative question out of 8 points, totaling 24 for all 3 questions. So a little bit more context about the interviews. Like we mentioned, if we do get funding requests that exceed the amount available for the grant, oral interviews may be used. During these oral interviews, we will ask applicants to elaborate on some of the submissions that they sent, and also some additional questions to assess the readiness of the grant program. We will reference back to documents that were previously submitted on behalf of the grant. And just to kind of give you some thoughts behind it, you're going to want an authorized official and anyone else that is a potential PTEC team member that should attend the interview. So just keep in mind, you want to put people on this interview team that are going to convey the intention and their best foot forward for this particular oral interview, if we have the need to do it, because we really want to see the intention and the planning that goes into this, because it does take quite a bit of work to implement one of these academies. So we want to talk a little bit about allowability versus non-allowability. This is a state-funded grant for general revenue. So a lot of pieces are definitely up and out for allowable expenditures, appropriate field trips that are aligned to the PTEC program, advisory councils, reasonable and necessary items for accomplishing the objectives of the PTEC program, curriculum planning and development, materials and supplies for PTEC, teacher professional development, salaries for instructional staff, teacher credentialing, equipment necessary, career counselor salary, salary for a dedicated program director administrator, work-based learning coordinator or liaison, day field trips for PTEC students where appropriate, extra duty pay for instructors, and supplies and materials for advisory council. A couple of things I will mention, I do get this question quite a lot. As you'll see, there is equipment, capitalization or capital outlay is allowed for PTEC. Unallowable expenditures are out-of-state travel, travel costs for officials, cost of membership in civic community organizations, food, beverage, snacks, debt service, and audit services. So you can see quite a bit is allowable. I've had a lot of really wonderful requests for capital outlay in previous grant iterations. So if you are curious, again, you can definitely put in the QA and we can make a couple mentions to the allowability expenditures. But I think it's a broad sweep of opportunities for allowable expenditures for PTEC. Like I mentioned, we were going to kind of revisit the timeline and application processing. So currently, the general webinars are available on the LASO website, as well as the application window being open through a unique link that was sent to your superintendent. So definitely connect with your district office there to make sure. But like we mentioned before, there is a PDF version available on the website that has always been a really great resource to folks that aren't the superintendent or folks that are close to the district office to complete. We are currently here in the program webinar pieces. I do want to mention that there is another PTEC webinar that will be happening at the end of this week. If any of your colleagues have not been able to attend, or if you would like to send someone over there before the recordings happen, please make sure that if you do have a question, to put that in the Q&A function here. Because we will be working on those to get answers to you all out shortly. For the scoring and vetting process after the December 22nd deadline at 11:59 p.m., as you'll see right there on our slides, we will go through a scoring and vetting and interview window January 1st through the 30th. With an anticipated award amount the week of February 7th through the 14th. As you'll see there, as soon as the award is announced, PTEC planning year begins. So a little bit before the 23-24, we do work with you as well as our technical assistance providers to start getting that mindset of PTEC programming. What does the coaching structure look like? What does that look like to ask questions, professional development opportunities, statewide convenings and regional convenings, and also being aware that it does take a little bit of time to negotiate and issue NOGAs. Wanted to make sure to talk about the official submission of application requirements for the superintendents. LASO will require a superintendent's signature in order to complete and formally submit the application. So you're going to want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row for the superintendent signing of that. Telling you this very much ahead of time. If your district has a unique circumstance and requires an accommodation, reach out to the LASO mailbox, that's laso@tea.texas.gov, as soon as you can to kind of sort out your superintendent situation if you need that support. Office hours for the P-TECH Planning and Implementation Grant particularly will be happening December 2nd from 12 to 1. I do want to mention that the 8 initiatives will all have office hours, but this one in particular will be for P-TECH. If your LEA is having trouble logging into the Qualtrics app, the unique links, or need assistance logging into your application, or an LEA that wants to ensure the timeline, we do have those links like I mentioned, but we do have this particular office hours. So some next steps and point of contacts. I'm Crystal Garza, I'm the Director of Post-Secondary Preparation Programs, but I do want to make sure to mention Mary Housley, who's done a really great job of the Q&As today. She is our statewide coordinator of college and career readiness school models. We have our CCRSN mailbox there for you to send questions to, as well as the LASO mailbox, which is laso@tea.texas.gov. Some of our next steps that we have are reviewing the LASO webpage. A lot of really great materials are up there already, revisiting the general FAQ, and participating in our P-TECH office hours, of which I think that the links should be up on the website. If not, once these PowerPoints are up, we'll be able to get you the link to that as well. So I am going to leave this up. We have about 10 minutes left for questions. I'm going to pull up some of the questions here. So one of them is if you can define rural classification. I believe in the program guidelines, there might be a link to the rural classifications that we use. There is a link, and so this will be in the FAQs for sure. There is a link to TEA's rural classification. We go based off of that list that is posted to TEA. So when you look at the FAQ, that will be on there. So one question that we do have is, do we need a business partner prior to the grant deadline? So we do want at least a letter of support from a business partner, even if they're not completely set up yet. We know that it takes a little bit of finessing for a business partner to kind of come on, because it's a really big ask for them to do. So if we do ask that you have that letter of support, that is a requirement. So if you can get that letter of support, we would really greatly appreciate it. We know that it does take a lot to do that. We do ask that the actual letters of support are not the assurance documents from our non-funded, but are at least a short statement of some kind from your business partner. We like to see that there, and I know that Dr. Fannin was asking for any sort of sample templates that we have. I think we have some on our P-TECH blueprint, interactive blueprint, so we can go ahead and try and link those on the FAQ document when those get posted. So yeah, we do have some sample templates that we'll try to get posted on there as well. It doesn't have to be like a long page, you know, if it's just a simple cover letter, that would be really great too. Let me see here. So one question is, should workforce needs reflect city or state data? It's whatever the local workforce board provides you all in terms of the labor market information. So whatever you all, I would assume it should reflect city or region. However you all kind of go about it for the career technical education labor market information that you use. So just want to make sure to point out to folks, eligibility for this particular grant should be for campuses that have not received any P-TECH funding. So if you are a campus that has already received P-TECH funding, you are not eligible for the grant. So an example of a question would be, if you already have implementation through P-TECH with the T-class grant, your campus is not eligible. If you're applying for another campus, that campus is eligible for that. A big part of it is wanting to make sure that other campuses that have not received any funding for this receive funding. One question is, can we apply for P-TECH programs within the same district? And I'm assuming if you already have P-TECH programs in the district, but you want to put one on a campus that doesn't have a P-TECH program, then that campus would be eligible to apply. We want to make sure that it's a campus that hasn't received funding before. So if your district has received funding through any of the list of P-TECH grants, and you can see that at the grants awarded page on the TEA website. So we will link that in the FAQ so you can go ahead and take a look at that. If that campus has received funding before, they are ineligible. If your district has campuses that have never received funding for P-TECH before, those campuses are eligible. Can an LEA become a P-TECH school without receiving the LASO grant? So yes, we do have a program application cycle that is actually currently open through December 16th. So very, very similar date to the LASO grant ending. And so, yes, we do have a non-funded option. We typically tell folks, if you and your district are really wanting to start a P-TECH and want to work with our technical assistance providers, whether it's through the LASO grant or through our non-funded program application cycle, you can absolutely go ahead and do that. It's through texasccrsmdesignation.org. I think I answered that one. We do have someone asking about transitioning from one early college high school to a P-TECH program. In terms of the eligibility, if that early college high school has not received a P-TECH planning or success grant in the past, they would be eligible to apply. I think I might have touched on all of the questions. We have about 4 more minutes. Let me just skim through any unanswered questions. For any folks that might have not asked a question yet in the Q&A function, I will be looking at the open questions as I'm skimming the answered here. So one great question is it possible to be granted for one part of LASO, example P-TECH, but not another? And so LASO has 8 different grant initiatives, with each initiative having their own eligibility and requirement and criteria. So it is possible for districts to receive funding for several initiatives there. So it definitely comes down to the different grant requirements for each initiative. I'm seeing that we don't have any particular other grants questions. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this session with the next steps of reviewing the LASO webpage, revisiting the general FAQs, and participating in our P-TECH office hours. So I want to thank you. Thank you so much for helping us kind of learn more, get some questions answered for you all. And we look forward to seeing some of you in the P-TECH office hours. So thank you so much.